one of the jobs of a speaker is to be like a host for the audience. You're providing an experience for them. And so you want to take care of them in some way. And by saying something like, I forgot was, whatever, getting flustered and then speaking about it, you're inviting the audience into your trauma, and then they start getting worried for you. Whereas if you allow yourself to have an inner environment of permission and of forgiveness, to like whatever mistake you make, you just forgive it right away. You have to allow and expect that you're going to make mistakes. I mean, we're human. So that's a given. So if you know you're going to be making mistakes here and there on occasion, you can allow yourself to not be perfect, allow yourself to have fun with the live moment and make something new. I remember, it's not like you can't ever forget what you're saying. We forget what we're saying, but you don't have to make it a hardship.
So you're a smart business committed to innovation, to service and to modern marketing, and you're asking, what's next? Wondering how you can become even more innovative. My name is Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and this is the InnovaBuzz Podcast, where we share all kinds of tips, advice and interview guests on all things innovation and leadership in modern marketing. Hi innovators, it's great to be back with another episode. I hope you've had an awesome week so far. Now I'm really excited to have today on the InnovaBuzz podcast as my guest, Linda Ugelow. Linda is an author, a speaker and a transformational speaking coach. She's also host of the Women Inspired TV show and podcast. She works with entrepreneurs, speakers and professional service providers to help them overcome their fear of public speaking in front of a camera, speaking in front of a crowd, so they can use these platforms to build their visibility, build their brand awareness, build their business, and provide thought leadership as well as making the impact they envision for themselves in their lifetime. Now, today's episode is brought to you by the Transformational Marketing Hub, where you'll find a host of free and exceptionally useful information to help you transform your marketing. You can access the Transformational Marketing Hub by visiting innovabiz.co/VIP. If you don't yet have an account, click the blue Take a Peek Inside button. As I said, it's free and exceptionally useful, and especially for you, my podcast audience. In our discussion today, Linda talked to me about transforming that fearful voice in your head, you know the one, transforming that into a powerful advocate and coach. We talked about how a focus on serving your audience will change your mindset about speaking or performing. And Linda shared with us a free gift, a 10-minute guided visualization to speaking with confidence. Without further ado, then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Linda Ugelow. Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today from Bedford in Massachusetts in the USA, Linda Ugelow, who's a speaker and a transformational speaking coach. She's the host of the Women Inspired TV show and podcast, and she works with entrepreneurs, speakers, and professional service providers who want to make a positive impact in the world. So what she helps them to do is overcome the fear of speaking in front of a camera or in front of an audience so that they can make use of those platforms to build their visibility, their brand awareness, and their business. So welcome to the podcast, Linda. It's a great privilege to have you as a guest.
And I feel honored as well.
Now, I'm sure everyone would agree that speaking on camera or speaking on stage is actually one of the most effective ways to build your know, like, and trust factor, because it gets you out in front of people. They get to see that you're a real person, and they learn about what you know and how they can relate to you. Unfortunately, a lot of people are afraid to do that, to be seen, to be public speaking, and public speaking is high up there on that what I fear most list. So Linda, you help your clients get over that dread and enjoy the limelight instead. So I'm really looking forward to exploring your suggestions and your ideas in great depth today. Now, before we start talking about all things speaking and video and confidence, let's find out a bit more about you as a person. As a young child, what did you want to do when you grew up?
I had one direction, and that was dancing. It was what I loved to do the most. I don't know. I think I enjoyed drawing as well, but dancing was where I felt like I could really express myself. And what I particularly liked about it is I didn't have to use words.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. I was not into speaking. In fact, I felt like I never really spoke very much until I hit 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you pursue dancing all through your childhood and teenage years?
I did. And my mother had an interest in dance and music and the arts, and she was very supportive. My father, on the other hand, thought this is okay as a child, but it's not what you do after college.
Yeah. So when did you discover that speaking was actually something you should add to your skill set?
Well, as recently, maybe just in the past 5 years, I started to think about it in earnest. I mean, I always needed to express myself. Once I got out of college, I was teaching. I was using movement as a tool for personal growth. And in my workshops and classes, I did need to articulate. So I was aware that it was an important thing to develop as a skill set at that time. But in terms of building visibility, that wasn't something that really came into my life until much later. Most urgently, I guess, when I became an online entrepreneur, and I saw that, well, how are people going to find out about me? And it's only if I put myself out there. So I better do that, and I better build the skill set that I need in order to get in front of people. So whether that's on video or on stage.
Yeah, well, there's an important message there already very early in the podcast. So a lot of people start online businesses and they think they can be kind of invisible and have products or whatever they do, but not put themselves out there, which is kind of a little strange. It goes counterintuitive to the traditional way that we work with people, because we work with people we like and we know and we trust.
Yes, I think you're hitting an interesting nail on the head, because what we see as a consumer online are websites. So there's this impression that all you need to do is create your space, your website, and make it compelling, and people will find you. But obviously, that's not true. It's kind of like an introvert's dream to be, like, oh, all I need to do is write down my ideas and make a blog. And, well, it's not that. I'm simplifying it, of course, because even starting a blog is very strategic, or can be and should be. But I think that it is very easy for people to, at the beginning, it's like you don't know what you don't know. And so you come into the online space not really seeing the full picture. You just get bits and pieces of it, and you take it from there.
And of course, one of the things that, and I was having a conversation this morning with service provider that I'm building some online courses, and the topic came up of, well, what do your customers want? Well, and then the obvious next step to answer that question is, let's ask them. So a lot of people build that online space that you mentioned and don't know what their audience is looking for. They don't ask the audience. And that's, to me, that's kind of the first symptom of being afraid of actually putting yourself out there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It's afraid of making the connection. What are they going to say? Maybe they don't want to speak with me.
Yeah.
They don't want to answer my questions. What if they say no? Yeah.
Or they might say something like, your idea is a really bad idea.
Yeah. Like, better not ask if I don't want to know the answer.
Yeah. All right. So as a child and young performer, then I guess you probably didn't really have stage fright at any point. It's something that came naturally to you then at some...
Actually, no. It's interesting because you can enjoy having the attention and be afraid of it at the same time. I think a lot of people live with this kind of ambivalence, like, I want to be seen, but I don't want to be judged, or am I good enough? Having all these questions and doubts inside. And on the other hand, like kind of like soaking in the attention, where you're allowing it to come in because you're tense otherwise, like not being afraid of not being good enough. And I felt like I experienced that as a child also. I had this memory of being little, and my parents had I think it was a New Year's Eve party. And I went down there, and it was like midnight or after midnight. And I guess maybe I heard them singing Old Lang Syne or some New Year's song. And my mom said, "Oh, come in. And why don't you sit down at the piano and play something for people?" And I was thinking, no, don't ask me to do that. Oh, play, play. Everyone was saying, play for us. And I didn't feel ready because I'd only taken piano for, I don't know, like a year or 2 years. And I was so nervous that I was like practically in tears, not being able to read the music, and I could hardly play. And of course, everybody was sweet because here's this little girl and they want to be supportive. But for me, it was traumatic, the idea of being pushed into something before I was ready. And I think a lot of people, one of the things I learned to do as a young child, though, is to improvise. I could make things up. So even if that's what I liked about dance, is that even if I made a mistake, I could cover it up. I could, it's easy when it's just movement. When it's sound and you hit the wrong note, everybody notices it. Yeah. But if you do a wrong, quote unquote, wrong movement, I mean, who's going to know the difference? So I really liked the flexibility and just the ease of being able to be where I was at with it. I had a fun experience with a friend. Every year we made a choreography of a dance together, and one year I guess I forgot what I was doing, so I was just improvising. And she stopped in the middle of the dance, put her hands on her hips, and said, "Linda, what are you doing?" And I'm like, keep going. I just lost my place. But yeah.
That's a really great metaphor, though, because a lot of the time when I'm at speaking events and listen to people speaking, particularly if they're really nervous, there's a tendency that people beat up on themselves and say, well, I went off script there, or I forgot an important point. Mm-hmm. And I always say, well, did you hand out your script to the audience beforehand? So nobody in the audience was following your script and saying, oh, they forgot to say this bit, or that sentence came out different than what it is on the script. Yeah. I said, nobody knows what you're going to say. The important thing is that you're engaging with the audience. You're getting a response that you want. So it's not about sticking to your script. And so this improvisation skill then is actually really important.
Absolutely. I love what you said about nobody knows what you were going to say. And if you don't, one of the jobs of a speaker is to be like a host for the audience. You're providing an experience for them. And so you want to take care of them in some way. And by saying something like, oh, I shouldn't have, I forgot whatever, getting flustered and then speaking about it, you're inviting the the audience into your kind of trauma, and then they start getting worried for you. Whereas if you allow yourself to have an inner environment of permission and of forgiveness, to like whatever mistake you make, you just forgive it right away. You have to allow and expect that you're going to make mistakes. I mean, we're human. So that's a given. So if you know you're going to be making mistakes here and there on occasion, you can allow yourself to not be perfect, allow yourself to have fun with the live moment and make something new. I remember, it's not like you can't ever forget what you're saying. We forget what we're saying, but you don't have to make it a hardship. And so, for instance, I gave a talk locally recently over the summer, and at the very last minute, I stuck in a slide, but I didn't practice. I just kind of stuck the slide in because I thought, I want to say something about this. And when I got to the slide, I looked at it and I said, I have no idea why I put this slide here. And everyone just kind of like laughed. And then it turned out to be something about preparing, which was kind of ironic. Someone at the end said, that was my favorite moment. And that's what's important to remember, that by you being human, you are modeling for other people to be human, that people aren't expecting perfection. I mean, it's exciting, if you go to a performance and someone just like nails it, but they don't see themselves in that the same way that they see the imperfection, because then it makes them feel, I could do that. And that's what it's about. It's about what you can provide for the other person, not just that it's this ego thing.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point that you've just made there. And my business coach is always saying, if you're speaking or presenting, you're serving your audience. And so to then suddenly say, I forgot a bit, I should have rehearsed that some more, then you're making it about you and not about the audience. And then the ego gets in the way. So that's a conversation to have with yourself afterwards when you're reviewing how you did and what you can do better next time, but not in front of the audience, because at that point you've got to serve them.
Yeah. And that's why I feel like looking at the fear that we have and the stress that it brings up for us to be seen and heard is such an important activity and intention, because what you are doing here is like naming all the things that happen when we are trying to push through the fear. And pushing through fear, in my opinion, does not really work for most people in terms of getting rid of the fear. What it does is it gets you through the task. But then the next time you do the task, the fear is still there and you have to deal with it. And what happens is that it is a distraction from you being able to serve your audience, because when you've got fear, you're managing the symptoms of it. You might have sweaty hands, or your brain freeze, or negative thoughts going through your head. Oh my God, why did I do that? And what a mess. And, all of a sudden you're like having a meltdown, and you're really not serving your audience then, because you are consumed with yourself. So you are distracted by the thoughts, the physical feelings, the physical sensations, the emotions, and it keeps you from being present. How I look at this is that you have this fear of being in front of people. It's bringing up this stress. It's there for a reason. And my feeling is, or my experience has been, and I see this with every single client I have, that if fear is telling you it's not safe, it's because you feel, or you have been taught, or you have been given indication someplace in your life that it's not safe. and what the process that you need to go through is one of investigation and curiosity. Well, okay, if I'm not feeling safe, and that's what fear is obviously telling me, that's what fear is, that it's not safe. Where might I have gotten that? Now, I hear this kind of ballied around a lot of, oh, people are afraid because it's in our human cellular memory of being chased by tigers, but there's nothing to be afraid of. Well, there's plenty of things to be afraid of. We've been, depending on our personal stories, and everybody is completely different, but we may have been bullied, we may have had expectations put on us, we may have been compared to others, we may have been physically hurt, had unconscious things said to us. It could be even our cultural expectation. My sister lives in Denmark, and she says in Denmark, you're not supposed to stand out. That's like a no-no. So for somebody to be a dynamic speaker on stage is difficult when you come from that culture. And I hear the same thing in the Netherlands. It's like you're taught to fit in, and that's how everybody feels comfortable because everyone's more or less the same. In the US, I don't know how it is in Australia, but in the US, there's much more of this individual value that any single person can stand out and maybe should or could. So that's not a cultural difficulty we have as a society, but in our families we might. It may be that our people don't do that. No one in our family ever went to college. Why should you? Or we all have pizza shops. Why do you think you're so special that you want to go to law school? So we may have these cultural values that we're surrounded by and that we absorb, and we hit up against that when we want to be seen and heard. So it could either be these past experiences that we had, these cultural beliefs, or the thoughts that we have in our head. I think that the thoughts that we have in our head come out of these other two things, but it's definitely something that we have to address if you want to overcome the fear, because if you don't feel safe inside yourself, you're not going to feel safe in front of other people.
Yeah, I was really fascinated by your take on that, because a lot of advice does come from the point of view of, face your fear and just, push through, and that will give you confidence. I mean, there's some truth to, building confidence from success, but the point of facing the fear and just going through it, it's kind of like, to me, it's, I've never jumped out of an airplane with a parachute or anything, and I'm not sure I want to do that, but because I'm afraid of heights. So to me, it's like somebody saying, well, just get up there and just, step off the ledge. At the door of the airplane, and it'll be all good. Well, I very much doubt that. So
exactly. So and there are a lot of people who, there are a lot of people who feel the same way about getting. Just get up there. Just get up there.
Yeah. So I was fascinated, to read about your approach in terms of understand the fears and where do they come from. So give us some practical guide then for somebody that does have a fear of public speaking, that I imagine is a lot of our audience, and what are some of the practical steps that you take people through to help them deal with those fears, understand those fears, and then work with them so that they can actually maybe mitigate them and achieve a result that they're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to preface this by saying I used to belong to that tribe that believed you should just push through the fear.
Yeah.
And the only reason why I changed is because it didn't work for me. I was doing live streaming back in 2015 every single day. And, with that mindset, you would think, okay, well, after a couple of months, I'll feel better. Well, a couple of months, I still felt like I was having a heart attack every single time I went on. And I said, wait a minute, something's not right here. Why isn't it going away? When I think about certain performers like Barbara Streisand, who to this day says she's terrified of performing and she takes drugs. A lot of speakers take drugs too. A lot of speakers just push through the fear, or they have a way of reframing it. I think why it works for some people eventually is that they get enough evidence that it's safe, that finally it calms the amygdala, calms that part of the brain that is fearing for its life. So what I recommend for people who want to get over their fear is, as I mentioned before, be curious. Like say, okay, what could have happened in my life that might have given me this idea that it's not safe? So for me, what came up first was I felt like I was going to be attacked. And when I was a young child, I had 2 older sisters, and my mother would single me out as the model child and say things like, why can't you girls be more like Linda? Well, they didn't like that. And they didn't like me because of it. They took it out on me because when they took it out on my mom, she would punish them. So instead, I would get the brunt of it, and they'd call me stupid and tell me to shut up. And sometimes they would hold me down on the floor and tickle me till I couldn't breathe. And my mother didn't realize they were torturing me because I was laughing, because I couldn't help but laugh, but I was suffering from it as well. Or they would kick me under the table. You know, they'd find ways to get at me. And I adored my sisters. They were my older sisters, and I really wanted them to love me. So what I realized was that by getting the attention, by being the center of attention, by having the limelight shine on me was dangerous, because it meant that I was going to lose their love and I was going to be physically hurt. And even though I'm really very close with my sisters now and have been for decades, it's kind of like there's an imprint that happens when we're young. It's not a conscious thing. It's not in our frontal lobe. It goes into the amygdala, which is that survival place of our brain that goes into fight, flight, or freeze. And it creates a pathway in our bodies that holds on to that in order to keep us safe. It happens for a reason. So when you have something where you are being put down, or you're being ridiculed or blamed unfairly. I have a client who was punished for laughing when he was 6 years old at another child who was trying to read and didn't know a particular word. Now, I mean, yes, it would have been nice if he didn't laugh, but he was so severely punished for it that he couldn't find his voice. Now, you know, for decades, everyone is asking him to speak up, you know, can't hear you, don't understand. And he was so traumatized by, you know, like he shouldn't be loud. He shouldn't show what he knows. He shouldn't. And in his mind, he was still punishing himself for making that mistake at age 6. You know? And I think that self-criticism, so the first thing is the impacting past experiences. The second, the self-criticism piece. Those self-critical voices are actually very young voices. We develop those early on in a way to protect ourselves. You know, maybe someone said it to us, so we believe it, or maybe we say it to ourselves so other people won't. Like, oh, if I tell myself that, you know, that was a stupid thing, then if someone else tells me it's stupid, it won't hurt as much. So it's a way that we protect ourselves, but that voice is kind of stuck in time from an age that we didn't have many resources or many skills. So we might take lots of courses on business conversation and how to talk, you know, with more finesse for your clients. And, we're always building our skills and capacity for communication with other people, but we don't have that continuing ed for our inner voices and the way we talk to ourselves and communicate with ourselves. So here we are, very mature in some ways on the outside and very immature, not in a judgmental way. I don't say that in a judgmental way, but just undeveloped on the inside. And so the trick with the inner critic is to, one, not to criticize it, but to listen to it, understand it, and understand that underneath that criticism is that part of us that actually does have a wise judge. And I feel like the inner critic is like a maladaptation to that kind of breaks off because of the hurt that we may have experienced, or disappointment, or whatever that those experiences might be individually. But it kind of breaks off from that place of, this is a very evaluative function of our brain, but it just has a lousy way of expressing itself. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like we can say to our critic, okay, I hear what you're saying, but can you say it in a nicer way? What would you have me do instead? How could I make it better? And then allow that voice of the critic to be coached out, coached and coaxed, perhaps, coached out to come up with those good ideas that are inside you, because actually it probably has very good taste.
Yeah, I'm curious, what would you advise in those situations where, let's say, you've identified a situation or experience in the past that has led to that inner voice?
What do you do with it once you know?
Yeah, that's right. How do you?
Okay, now what, Linda? Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So one of the things that's kind of fun about being human is that we are very creative, and we make meaning out of things, and we create rituals. So this is where it can become a lot of fun. How to like clear or deactivate those experiences? Well, one way is by writing. You could journal about it. You could write it on a piece of paper, crunch it up, and burn it in a candle flame or a big bonfire, or you could burn it and then scatter the dust on the river or a body of water, or you could bury it in the compost pile and let it recycle into, food. So you can make up things. I tend to use, I have a few go-to modalities that I like. I use something called EFT, which is emotional freedom technique. Some people know it as tapping. And it's have you heard of that?
Yeah.
So if for those listeners who may not have, it's, you tap on certain meridian points, mostly on the face and the hand and the collarbone. And the statements that you say interrupt the usual patterns of response. So you might be saying, my sisters hated me. It was really scary. And you're tapping. And as you're recounting the story, you're kind of interrupting the way that your body normally is processing that, which is kind of in a loop. It just goes around and around and around. And this kind of like interrupts that, so that you have the possibility of kind of like loosening your attachment to the story. And so that's one technique that I enjoy a lot. Another one is simple forgiveness. Like, I forgive you for tickling me. I forgive you for being jealous. I forgive you, Mom, for singling me out. So you can go through forgiving yourself and other people, and you do it as much as you need to in order to feel the release.
Yeah, I think I've seen that be very powerful. And I think the key thing there comes back to forgiving yourself. Because in nearly all examples that you can come up with there, and in the two you've shared there's an underlying unconscious belief that somehow I myself was the person that caused all this. It was my fault. And that's probably where the fear is, because you're now getting up on stage or on video, on camera, and there you go. You might end up doing the same thing again.
That's right. So this is why the clearer you are of these things from the past, the clearer you are from the thoughts in your mind, the more capacity you have to be present. And that's what presence is, right? It's not being in the past. It's not being in the future. It's just being where you are. Of course, the present is always moving forward. You can't hold on to the present either. So there is a sense of forward motion even in presence, I believe.
Did you do any visualization or reflect back on maybe a time when you did a speech that you absolutely nailed it, where you felt so confident and you thought everything just worked brilliantly? Do you use that when you're going on stage again?
No, I don't actually. I do visualization, and I think visualization is one of the most powerful tools that we have as humans. In fact, later on, I'd love to share a free gift I have of visualization for speaking confidence. What I like to do is to visualize how I see myself on stage, just the way I want to feel. I visualize, what I look like moving in the most confident way and having the energy that I want to have. And I visualize the response of the audience and whatever it is I've been working on, I put that in my visualization. And I also visualize how I want to feel afterwards. I visualize talking to the audience. I visualize how I feel in myself as I'm going home and the pride that I feel, so that it kind of pre-paves the neurology for that to happen. That's what I like to do. In terms of recalling something that I've nailed before, I just feel proud about those things, but I don't try to bring them into the future. Because I feel like every experience is new and different, and I want to be present.
Yeah. And how important is practice for you when you've got a presentation to make or a speech to give?
Yeah, I think it depends on the circumstance. So, like if you are doing a panel discussion, you may know the topics and you may think about ahead of time what you want to say, but you may not want to have it word for word. I think the more experience you have, what happens is that you have what are called bits. So a lot of times people ask the same questions. So you may have a particular way that you like to answer that. And so it's not like you're making it up completely, but you may want to vary it from time to time to keep it fresh for you and also for the audience. Because if you've got people who are following you every time you do let's say even a podcast, you want to have something new for them to discover. So you don't want to be too rote about it. But if you're doing something like a TED Talk, or you're doing a storytelling, or stand-up comedy is something I'd like to get into. I mean, that is something that you would probably memorize word for word.
Yeah.
And you want to practice plenty in order for it to feel like it's not rehearsed. If it feels rehearsed, you haven't rehearsed enough.
Yeah, I love the idea of the chunks or the bits that you mentioned, and I've heard a few people talk about that in terms of being able to put together new talks very quickly, because you build from the chunks that you already have related to a particular topic, and then you kind of refine it into a new talk, but you're not starting from complete scratch. And also it works, like you say, really well in a panel discussion or a Q&A session. The stand-up comedy is an interesting one, because I like to watch the good comedians, and so it's so important there, the timing and delivery. And I imagine that takes a lot of rehearsal.
Yes. And even for, let's say, speaking on a podcast like we're doing today, you can be developing your sense of timing and delivery and always improving on it. And this is where learning to not be so self-judgmental comes in handy, because if you are really critical, you don't want to listen to yourself. And if you don't want to listen to yourself, you can't learn. You can't. So what would be so much more helpful is if you could, let's say, listen back or watch back and not have to cringe.
Yeah.
But instead to have this sense of, as I mentioned before, this sense of permission that it's okay to be in process. It's okay to be just where you are. You don't have to be any better than you are. You are on a journey. And of course you're going to get better, and you will get better the more you're able to look at yourself or listen to yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I remember when I first started the podcast, and we're up to about episode 143 now, so it's a few years ago, and I couldn't go back and listen to the episodes because I just cringed, and
I know.
I was very self-critical. Now, of course, episode 1 compared to episode 143, there's a big difference in the way I present myself now, so I have improved quite a lot over the years. But now I actually go back and listen, well, for 2 reasons. First of all, I have awesome guests on, and I learn a lot from them, and I always learn new things when I go back and listen to the episode again afterwards, as a listener and as opposed to the interviewer. And that the second thing, of course, is that I get to hear myself, and I find out how many ums and ahs and you knows and okays that I've used, which is the things that I keep trying to work on to improve. So I can measure how am I doing with that and what else can I improve on.
Right. Right. And probably at this point, as you look back, it's easier for you to appreciate how the journey and how far you've come. And so when you do watch those earlier ones, you have you give yourself some slack.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
You don't beat yourself up for, oh, I said 5 ums this episode, and then you listen to an earlier episode and you think, well, that's a lot less than I used to do.
That's right. Well, you know what I love about those things, though? Every mistake I make, I think, this is a good teaching point. So whenever I have something where for instance, I did a storytelling earlier this year, and it was a very unusual venue where it was only 4 rows deep, but it was very, very wide. And I thought, how am I going to include the audience? I'll have to look from side to side. And I ended up looking side to side and side to side. And when I looked at the video, I thought, I'm never looking center. What's with that? And so, but I could have said, oh, that's awful. And how could you do that? And how embarrassing. And what did people think? But instead, what I did is I went into my Facebook group and I said, hey, I want to share something with you. This is what happened to me. And I realized that I was avoiding looking in the center. And it got me thinking, was there something about the center that I needed to avoid? And so just taking this sense of curiosity and not making yourself wrong, but like saying, well, what's interesting here? And what can I learn? And what can I share? And how can other people benefit from this too? So like you see, what happens is we're in schools that we are meant to know the answers all the time. We're meant to be right all the time. We're meant to always be at the best, and we're not given that space and permissiveness to be exploring and make mistakes and fail and have that be an interesting thing. No, we get graded on it, and we're bad if we don't get the good grades. And this is very damaging.
Yeah.
And it's completely counter to how we need to be as entrepreneurs or be in business.
And it also, I think, educates the curiosity, the childlike curiosity that everybody's born with. It educates a lot of that out of us.
That's right. And it's a shame. And but as adults and with awareness, we can bring it back.
Yeah, and it comes. I'm interested with the idea of the curiosity and looking at, that example of looking at the center as opposed to looking at the left and right edges, how important it is to actually look at that, but then to actually do the next step and experiment with things.
Yes.
Because what you might take out of that is, well, what if I did it this way? Would that work better?
Yes.
And the only way you'll know is if you then do it and try it.
That's right. Yep.
So you have your own podcast as well, which is actually a TV show. So you do video on the podcast. So tell us a little bit about translating that, getting on stage to the online space, getting onto video and running podcasts, running webinars, or whatever it might be.
Are you asking about what's different about it?
Yeah. What's different? What's similar?
I think what is most different, which is obvious, which is when you're live, you've got live people in front of you. You have faces, body language that we as humans are accustomed to interpreting and interacting with. And when you are on camera, well, it's different being on a TV show because, as a host, I do look into the camera, but my guests don't. They are looking at me. So they are allowing themselves to be looked at, which is kind of similar to being on stage, actually. So I actually am a performer. I've been in a women's world music group for almost 40 years now. And there is a piece of that when you are not necessarily looking directly at the audience, or let's say you're an actor and you're doing a play, where you are allowing yourself to be viewed, allowed yourself to be seen and heard, but you're not, it's like there's a, it's like they are being let in a process. And that's what I feel happens on the TV show. But that's different than speaking face to camera. Face to camera is not natural to us, but we can use what we know from our interactive skills of like looking in someone's eyes to the camera lens. Because when you look at the lens, you are giving the viewer the experience that you are looking right at their eyes. So your connection to the lens and your appreciation of the lens is very important. And one of the things I do in my video program is help people make friends with the lens because they are both needing to connect. It's different than just looking in that direction. Well, a lot of people look in the direction, but they're not really connecting with the lens. And it does take some exploration. I love that word that you used before. Some exploration and experimentation to really see, well, if I do this, what happens? If I do that, what happens?
Yeah, and I find there's actually a real skill to that I haven't mastered yet, I have to say. I look at the lens and I try to imagine eyes there or a face there, and when I look back at the video myself, I don't feel engaged by what I've just recorded. So I think, no, I didn't get that right. But I haven't got a formula for then saying, well, here's what I need to do. So it's more a case of, okay, have another go at it, and a lot of trial and error involved.
One thing you might explore is the idea of being seen from the lens. So if, when we are talking with someone, we're looking, but we're also receiving. We're receiving the gaze, we're receiving the regard. So one of the things that people miss with the lens is that you are also receiving, even though you don't see the person there, you have to imagine that they are. Because the connection is a two-way street. So it's not that you're just giving, you are receiving. You do that automatically. If you and I were sitting across from each other, it would be happening. So see if you can play around with that idea, and I'd be curious what it does for you.
Yeah, it's great advice. I think the similarity, of course, between the online space, presenting in the online space, whether it's video, audio, webinars, whatever format it might take, and presenting in real life, on stage or in small groups, workshops or so on, is the key thing. And I think people forget this a lot in the online. The key thing is you've got to build a relationship with the audience, and you've got to be there to serve the audience, meet their needs. And that relationship is what then grows to can grow to something bigger. If you don't have that relationship, nothing happens.
Yes, and the other piece that goes along with that is that when you have an audience and you're on stage, they're not distracted by 10 different things.
Yeah.
When you are trying to connect with people, they've got their email, they've got their social media, they've got all their devices. It's a very different
20 other browser
20
tabs
other things
open.
that you're competing with. Yes, that's quite different.
That's a good point. Yeah. All right, this has been really fascinating. Now, you mentioned earlier that you had a gift guided, I think it's a guided visualization tool. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
So in this, it's a 10-minute guided visualization that relaxes you in your body, because in order for you to really maximize the visualization, you need to be in a state of receptivity. So it starts with relaxation, and then it guides you through your own imagination of your next speaking event. And I say speaking, it doesn't have to be on stage. It could be that you're going to a networking event and you're going to be sharing what you do in a circle, or you're presenting at a meeting. It could be on video if you want to translate it. So you can use this to translate to what your experience is going to be, where you put in your own details of what you want to feel and experience. And I've gotten some great reports from people how even doing this one thing has really moved the needle for them.
Sounds really great. So we'll put a link in the show notes to that gift that Linda's kindly offered, and hopefully it's helpful to people, and I look forward to hearing the feedback as well.
Great.
Yeah, so this has been really great, Linda. I could go on for ages, but we're getting to the end of our time, so I want to move on to the Buzz, which is our innovation round, and it's designed to help our audience, who are primarily innovators and leaders in their field, with some tips from your experience. So I've got 5 questions that hopefully we'll get some really insightful answers that will help our audience go out and do something awesome as a result.
Great.
So what's the number one thing you think anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
People need to play, and to play without judgment. So whatever that means to you, if it's like playing with an instrument, playing in the sand, but allow yourself to find places to play. You can even take your jar of pens and make different kinds of, designs on your desk with them. But let yourself play. Yeah,
I love it. And experiment. Okay, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
I love having my TV show and podcast. I love talking to different people, and it allows me to look at the world in a new way, to get new views. Yeah, and what I particularly like about it as an interviewer is you're asked to ask questions. So you're by nature following your own curiosity to dig deeper into what other people have on their minds.
Yeah. That's great advice. I love that, and I practice that, obviously. I get great enjoyment and learn a lot out of the podcasts, and I certainly do get new ideas. So, yeah. what's your favourite tool or system for improving your own productivity and allowing you to be more innovative?
Movement, creative movement. And I know that sounds, like, whoa, how do you do that? I do a practice where I close my eyes and I just say, okay, arms, what do you feel like doing? I let my arms move however they want. And I just follow it with curiosity. And what I feel is happening is it opens up the creative source, because I'm going into the body in its purest language, which is movement, and letting my mind empty out. And sometimes I like narrate what I'm doing, and it's like, okay, my rolling hands, stretching, pulling in, and just the act of movement puts me into a creative flow.
Fascinating. And it sounds like that might be influenced by your background in dance.
Yes, absolutely. And anybody could do it. It's not like you're doing anything beautiful. It's just letting the body speak.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's something to try out.
Try it out.
Yeah. Okay. And what's the best way to keep a client on track?
I like checking in for alignment. I always ask my clients to close their eyes and just listen in and bring themselves into the present, because I feel that ultimately we do what we want to do and we resist what we don't want to do. So we may as well figure out what that is.
Yeah. Yeah, that is great advice. And I've had situations recently where I've had to step back and say, well, do I really want to do that? I know it's on the plan and I know I've been procrastinating and it hasn't happened. Do I really want to do it? So, yeah, right. That is a really good point, that we actually do what we want to do. So it's good to figure that out. All right. What's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
I like to suggest for people to notice what you disagree with. Like when you are reading a book, do you come across something and say, no, I don't agree with that? Or when you look at something on Facebook or in the news, because when you notice what bothers you in the industry or makes you annoyed, it highlights, what you do believe in contrast. And I think that's even a fun, playful way of taking a stand.
Yeah. Well, what would you suggest then if there is something you discover that I really disagree with that?
Then to speak up. So for instance, in my case, I really disagreed with, you got to live with fear. Or fear will always be there. Or the critic will always be there. I say, no, it doesn't have to be that way. And which would you choose if you had a choice of the critic hanging around or transforming the critic to this wise inner enthusiast? I mean, which would you have?
Yeah, that's a good analogy, good example. So notice what you disagree with and see what you can do different.
That's right.
All right, that's been really great, Linda. Thanks. What's the future for you and your business then?
I am working on a book.
Yeah.
So I think that is my biggest project at the moment, where I am laying out my method and formula for helping people through this process. And my hope is to be able to take that on the road with training and talks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, look forward to that then. Got a timeline for that?
Oh, yes. Do I want to put it, do I want to say that in public and then have to, yeah.
All right, we'll touch base again later.
My hope is for late 2019. It'll be out.
Okay. All right. Well, there we go. We can keep an eye out for Linda's book in the latter part of 2019.
Fabulous.
So What's the number one piece of advice you'd give to any business owner who wants to be a leader in their field and in innovation and who wants to get out there and be more visible?
I would say open your heart and be generous. That leadership is an act of generosity. It's a lot easier not to put yourself out there. But it is a real service, and be willing to share what you know and what you believe with an open heart.
Yeah, I think that is a wonderful mindset to have, and then to take whenever you want to get on stage or on camera, because with that mindset, it's a lot easier to deal with the fear. I'm doing this for this reason, and so you can kind of deal with the fear a little bit easier, I think.
But also know you can do something about that fear.
Yeah.
And be even, and really love being in the limelight. I mean, if you're going to do it, you may as well love it.
That's right. Yeah. I know, and I think there's a lot of enjoyment and pleasure that you can derive out of being in the limelight and speaking, being on stage, performing, whatever it might be.
And then, you know what? The audience loves it more too, because when they see you're having fun, they can play with you.
That's right. Yeah, I love watching music performers that are so, I'm not fussed about how good their tonality or rhythm or whatever it might be is in the technical sense. If I'm seeing that they're having an absolute ball on stage, I mean, as long as they're reasonably competent, obviously, but if they're having an absolute ball on stage, that enjoyment just translates to the audience. It's really powerful.
Yes, absolutely. That's what we want for ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's what we want for each other.
That's right. All right. This has been really great, Linda. Where can people reach out to you and say thank you?
You can find me all over the internet with my name, Linda Ugelow, which is Ugelow. And that guided visualization for speaking confidence, you can get at lindaugelow.com/speaking confidence.
Great. We'll post links to that in the show notes, as well as your website and a couple of the other places where people can find you, like Twitter and LinkedIn. All right. And finally, who would you like me to interview on a future InnovaBuzz podcast, and why?
I think of my mentor and friend, Terry Trespicio. Terry is a 2-time TED Talk speaker, and she does stand-up on the side, and she is a brand message strategist. Very fun. I think you would so enjoy speaking with her, and your audience would adore her too.
All right. Well, we'll get an introduction from you to Terry. And Terry, if you happen to be listening to this, look out for an introduction from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Linda Ugelow. So thanks so much for your time and insights, Linda. It's been really fun today. I've enjoyed it a lot. I've got a lot of new ideas for how to approach my next speaking and looking at the camera when I'm doing videos, so engaging with that lens. So I've learned a lot. I hope the audience has enjoyed this as well, and I wish you all the best for the future, and let's keep in touch.
I'd love to do that. Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed that insightful conversation with Linda, and as I did, noted some ideas from her recommendations, and perhaps even noted some actions you'll apply to your own speaking or performing on camera. I really liked Linda's recommendation to explore your fears with curiosity and work out how to turn that fearful voice into a mentor for your speaking. I'd love to know what you took away from Linda's interview. Leave a comment below the blog post, which can be found at innovabiz.co/Linda Ugelow. That is LINDAUGELOW. All lowercase, all one word, innovabiz.co/Linda Ugelow. You'll also find contact information for getting in touch with Linda there, as well as links to all the resources we mentioned, including her 10-minute guided visualization to speaking with confidence. Linda suggested I interview Terry Trespecchio, a branding strategist and coach, on a future InnovaBuzz podcast. So Terry, keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Linda Ugelow. Remember to visit innovabiz.co/VIP to access the Transformational Marketing Hub and all of its free and exceptionally useful information to help you transform your marketing. Stay connected. Head on over to iTunes or Stitcher or Pocket Casts and subscribe to the InnovaBuzz podcast so you make sure you'll never miss another episode. We'd also love you to leave us a review, because what you think matters. Take some of the ideas you've heard today and apply them in your business. Any thoughts, ideas, suggestions, or questions, share them in the comments below the blog post. And remember, if you want to get better marketing results than you ever have, join our fantastic LinkedIn community at the Transformational Marketing Academy. All you have to do is go to innovabiz.co/TMAC. It's free to join. Hope to see you there soon. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBiz. Remember to be awesome and keep innovating.